We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Beis Amud Aleph and Meseches Bava Metzia. This is Bava Metzia Daf 32a. On the previous summit, the Gemara said that Rav Safra dissolved the partnership in front of two people. And Rabba Bar Rav Huna, when he heard about this, he said, either bring me the three people, the Bezdin that you dissolved the partnership in front of, or bring me Trey Migo Tlasa, bring two of the three people. Rashi says, Trey Migo Tlasa Shnaim Min Hashlosha Yavo. Two of the three people should come. V'yoidu Lomar Shlosha Hayinu, and then they'll testify and say that there were really three of them. V'inami, or you could bring me Trey Sahadi to Palak to Ba'ape Beit Tlasa. Two witnesses that say that you dissolve the partnership in front of three people in front of a Bezdin. In any case, the point is that Rabbi Bar Rav Huna told Rav Safra, you need a Bezdin to do this. He didn't have a Bezdin. He just did it in front of two people. So Amar Lei, so he said to him, from where do you know this? How do you know that you need a Bezdin? Amar Lei said to him, because we learned in the Mishnah, Im yesh sham Bezdin masna b'fneihem. If there is a Bezdin, then he can make a Tanai in front of them. That's referring to, again, the person who is returning the lost object, but he's going to lose out on whatever job he was doing, whatever pay he was going to get. He wants to be fully reimbursed. So it's out in the Mishnah that if there's a Bezdin, he should make such a condition in front of the Bezdin, say that he wants to be fully reimbursed for what he's losing out on. Ain't sham Bezdin, but if there is no Bezdin, b'fnei miyas, in front of whom he can make that condition, so then shalo kodim, so then his comes first, meaning he can do his job, he doesn't have to return the lost object. So you see over there you need a Bezdin, so too over here when you're dissolving the partnership, you need a Bezdin. Amar Lei said to him, Midami, is it really comparable? Can you really compare the case of the lost object where the person is giving up the job that he was doing to this case of dissolving the partnership? Because Hasam demapik memona mehayu mosiv lahai, but inan bezdin, over there, where you're taking money from one party, giving it to another party, so there you need a bezdin. Aval hacha, but over here, didi shakli, here I'm taking what is mine, giloi milsa bialma, we're just essentially revealing, they had to dissolve the partnership, they had to evaluate how much the items were worth, and so therefore we're just figuring that out, betray sagile. It should be enough with two people. Teda, you should know the Tanan, because we learned in a Mishnah, Almana mocheres shelo b'fnei bezdin, and Almana is allowed to sell not in front of bezdin. So you see that in those kinds of situations, you don't need a bezdin. Amar le Abaya said to him, V'lav mi itmar Allah, but wasn't it stated on that Mishnah? Amar of Yosef bar Menyumi, Amar of Nachman, of Yosef bar Menyumi said that Rav Nachman said, Almana ein tzricha bezdin shel mumchin. All it means is that an Almana does not need a bezdin of experts. Avol tzricha bezdin shel hadyotos, but she does need a bezdin of regular people, so therefore this is not a proof. It could be that we really do need a bezdin in this situation. And Rashi explains, Yesham bezdin, again it says in our Mishnah that if there's a bezdin, he can make that tanai, ustam bezdin shlosha, and a bezdin in general is usually three people. Alma in koach lahavgir mamon zeh etzel zeh b'pachos mishlosha. You see that there's no ability to be mafgir mamon, to render money ownerless from one party to another with less than three people. He argued back, Giloi milsa, over here is just a Giloi milsa. Sheyadu shechalakti b'shav. It's just that people have to know that the division was made, and it was made evenly. It was made fairly. That's all we really need. We don't need anyone there, anyone present for any other purpose. Therefore, he argued two people should be sufficient. You just need witnesses. Almana. So then we had a Mishnah talking about an Almana that's from Meseches Ksubis. Let's say she's a widow, hanizonos minichse yisomim, and she's being supported from the property of the orphans. Mocheres lemizonos. She can sell for the purpose of sustaining herself. Shelo bebezdin. She doesn't need a bezdin. Uvilvad sheyiru shnayim shlo timchor bezol. As long as two people see that she wasn't selling it for too cheap. And again, then the Gemara responded, no, she doesn't need a bezdin of mumchin, but she does need a bezdin of hadyotos. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Mitzah berefes, if he finds the animal in a stable, ein chayeba, then he's not obligated to return that animal, but if he finds the animal in Rishus Harabim, chayeba, then he is chayev, he is obligated to return the animal. The Gemara will explain this. Let's say the lost object is in a cemetery and he's a Kohen. Lo yitami lo, he shouldn't become tamei to return that lost object. Im amar lo aviv hitami, if his father tells him to become tamei. Osha amar lo al tachzir, let's say his father says, let's say it's a situation where he could return the lost object, and his father tells him, don't return the lost object. Lo yishma lo, he shouldn't listen to him, he shouldn't listen to his father in that situation, rather he should do the mitzvah. Parak v'tan, let's say he unloads the animal and then it gets loaded up again, he unloads it, it gets loaded again. Afilu arba v'chamisha pa'amim chayiv, even 4 or 5 times he's chayiv. Shenemar, as it says, azov tazov, it says you should help, it uses the double language, it means to say even multiple times. Halach v'yashav lo, let's say the owner of the animal goes and sits down. V'yarmani says, hoel v'yolecha mitzvah, since you have a mitzvah to do it, imritzoncha lifrok prok, if you want to unload, you unload and do it all by yourself. So Pater, in that case, he's Pater Shenemar Imo, it says with him. Now, the Gemara earlier said it doesn't have to be imo. Sometimes he has to unload it even when he's not with the owners, and that presumably is talking about the next line of the Mishnah. The next line of the Mishnah says, Im haya zaken o chol, if the owner is elderly or if the owner is sick, so now he's not able to help out, then chayiv. In that case, he is chayiv. That would be a case where you're chayiv, even though the person is not imo, even though he's not doing it together with the owner. But there, the owner isn't just simply saying, I don't want to do it, you should do the whole thing. There's a reason why the owner is not helping. Either he's elderly or he's sick. Mitzvah min haTorah lifrok avalo lito, and the Mishnah says, Tanakama says, it's a mitzvah from the Torah to unload, but it's not a mitzvah to load. Rabbi Shimon says, af liton, even to load. This will be discussed in the Gemara. Rabbi Yossi Haglili says, Im haya olav yeser al masof, the animal is overburdened. If it's more than the normal burden is on the animal, ein zakek lo, then he doesn't need to deal with it, he's not obligated. Shenemar, as it says, tachas maso, it says that the animal is under its burden. That means to say masoi sheyachol lamod bo, that is a burden that in general or in theory, so to speak, the animal could withstand. And Rashi explains, mitzvah berefes, if he finds the animal in a stable, so then it says he's not chayiv to return it. That seems very obvious. But Gemara mefarish my yitzrach, the Gemara will explain why it's necessary to teach this. Haisa beveis hakavaros fu kohen. Again, let's say the lost object is in a cemetery, he's a kohen, so in that case he's not obligated. O she'amar lo al tachzer. Then it said, let's say his father tells him, you should become tamei, when really he's not supposed to become tamei because he's a kohen. Or the father tells him in a situation where he really could return the object, don't return it. V'hu b'makom shu muter leilech sham. Again, in the al tachzer case, the item is in a place where he's allowed to go, and the father is saying, still don't return it. So in that case, you don't listen to the father. Halach v'yashav lo habaylim. Again, if the owners are the ones saying that they're not going to help out, then you don't have to do it. Aval lo liton b'gemar mefarish. Again, it said it's not a mitzvah to load. That will be explained in the Gemara. And the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Refes she'amru, the stable that we're talking about in the Mishnah, eina masev ve'eina mishameres. It's not causing the animal to stray, but it's also not guarding the animal. How do we know that? Eina masev, the fact that it's not causing the animal to stray, midikatani eino chayiv, because it says you're not obligated. If that was causing the animal to stray, then actually you would be chayiv to return the animal. Ve'eina mishameres, but it's not a guarded area. Midi itzrich lemisni, from the very fact that we need to teach it. If it was guarded, it's so obvious that you wouldn't have to return it. Midi itzrich lemisni eino chayiv, from the fact that it has to say you're not chayiv, it must be there's some chiddush, so the idea is that it's not a guarded area. Because if it enters your mind to say that we're talking about where it is a guarded area, so hashtam mishkach lo avroi ma'ayeh lo legavoy. Now, if you would have found the animal outside, you'd actually be obligated to return it and put it into such an area that's a guarded area. That would be considered hashavas aveda to put it over there. So mishkach lo megavoy miboy. So if you found it already inside, we need to teach you that you don't need to return it. Of course, you don't need to return it. It's considered returned. Ela shmamina. Rather, you see from this, eina mishamer shmamina. You see that we're talking about a stable that is not guarded, and the Gemara says, indeed, you see that is the case. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, mitzvah berefes eno chayiv. Again, if he finds it in a stable, he's not chayiv. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak says, v'hu she'omedes toch l'tchum. The case specifically is that it is within the boundaries of the city, and therefore, since it's within the boundaries of the city, you don't need to return it. And mechlal, and that would imply divrei reshus haravim, that if the animal is in the public area, ve'afilu b'soch hatchum nami chayiv, then even if it was within the boundaries of the city, but still because it's in the reshus haravim, he'd be chayiv to return it. And the Gemara continues, Ika demasni lo asefa. There are those that teach this on the end of the Mishnah, essentially in the opposite fashion. But Reshus harabim chayiv, but it says if the animal's in Reshus harabim, you're chayiv to return it. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak says, V'hu shomedes chutz l'tchum. That's only if it is outside of the boundary of the city. Mechlal devorefes, and that would imply the opposite. That would imply that by a refes, by a stable, afilu omedes chutz l'tchum, even if it's outside of the boundaries of the city, nami eno chayiv, but also in that situation, since it's in the refes, you would not be chayiv to return it. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "Beveis hakvaros lo yitamelo." If the item is in a cemetery and he's a kohen, he doesn't have to become tamei to return it. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, "Minayin shim amar lo aviv hitamei." From where do we know that if his father says that you should become tamei? Osha amar lo al tachzir. He says you should not return the item when really he's supposed to return the item. Shelo yishmalo. How do we know that he shouldn't listen to him? He shouldn't listen to his father. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, "Ish imo ve'aviv tiro." It says a person needs to fear his mother and his father. V'yes shav so sai tishmor ne Hashem. And it says you have to keep the Shabbos. And the idea is kulchem chayavin bechvodi. The idea is all of you are chayiv in my honor, meaning the father and the mother are chayiv. It's ani Hashem. They're chayiv es shav sosai tishmor. They're chayiv in the honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so therefore, if the person's father tells him to violate a prohibition, he's not supposed to violate the prohibition. But the Gemara continues, time of the cause of Rachman es shav sosai tishmor. The only reason why he doesn't listen to his father is because of this specific pasuk. It says es shav sosai tishmor. Halavachi, but if not for this pasuk, hava min etzaisale. I would think that he should listen to the father. Let's say in the situation of returning the lost object, he should listen to the father and not return the lost object. But the Gemara says, V'yamai, why would we even think that? Hai aseh, in terms of listening to his father, that's a positive commandment. It's an aseh. V'hai los aseh v'aseh, when it comes to returning a lost object, that's actually both a negative commandment and a positive commandment. V'lo aseh aseh v'dachias los aseh v'aseh. An aseh cannot come along and push off a los aseh and an aseh. So why would I even think to listen to one's father? Why do I need the pasuk of Es Shab Sosai Tishmoru? And the Gemara says, Itzrich, it is necessary, we do need the pasuk. Because one might have thought, since honoring one's father and mother is compared to honoring HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because it says over here, it says honor your father and your mother. And it says further on, it says you have to honor Hashem, use a similar language. So therefore I might have thought one should listen to his father in this case. That's what the pasuk is teaching us, as Shab Sosai Tishmoru is teaching us, the lo lishmalei, that he should not listen to him. And Rashi explains, Ani Hashem, I am Hashem, afal pisha marti loch yorei asavicha, even though I said to you that you should fear your father, Ani adon l'shnechem, I'm both of your masters. V'im amar loch avicha avor al devari l'chal Shabbos. If your father says to transgress my words and to desecrate Shabbos, al tishma lo, you shouldn't listen to him. Have amin at saisale. So the Gemara said, well, without the pasuk, I would have thought you do listen to him. Da'asi asay de kibud, v'dachi los asay de lo sucha l'salim. Apparently the positive commandment of kibud avaim, we would have thought would push off the negative commandment not to hide from the lost object. And then the Gemara said, Aveda asay vilos asay. And Aveda is actually both. Lost object is both positive and negative, because Hashev Tashivim, it says you should return it. That's a positive commandment. And it says Lo Sucha L'Salim, you can't hide from the lost object. That's the negative commandment. And finally the Gemara said, Hukash Kevodam, the honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's the honor of one's father and mother is compared to the honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. B'Gzeir Shava, that's a Gzeir Shava, Kavedes Avicha, Kavedes Hashem Mehonecha, that Gzeir Shava. And so therefore you might have thought to listen to one's father, and that's why we need the pasuk to say no. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, mitzvah min ha-Torah lifrok. It's a mitzvah from the Torah to unload the animal. Avalo liton, but not to load the animal. The Gemara says, my avalo liton. What does it mean when the Tanna Kama, the Mishnah, says that there's no mitzvah to load the animal? Ileim avalo liton klal. If you're going to say it means that there's no mitzvah whatsoever to load the animal, to help the owner of the animal load the animal, ma'ishna prika dechsev azov ta'azov imo. What's the difference that by unloading there's a pasuk? It's written in the pasuk, you have to help him out. And te'ina nami yaksev hakem takim imo. By loading also, it says hakem takim, which says you have to help him to load the animal. Clearly, they are both midorai. So what does the Tanna Kama even mean? Ella, rather, what it means is as follows. Mitzvah min ha-Torah lifrok bechinam. It's a mitzvah from the Torah to unload, and you have to do that for free. You can't take any payment. V'lo liton bechinam ela b'schar. But when it comes to loading, you don't have to do it for free, but you do it and you get paid for it. Rabbi Shimon says, af liton bechinam. Even to load, you have to do it for free. And the Gemara says, Tanina lahad tanur rabbanan. Our Mishnah is saying the same thing as the following brisa. Prika bechinam te'ina b'schar. The Tanna Kama says, unloading you do for free, loading you do for wages. Rabbi Shimon says, zu v'zu bechinam, both the person does for free. Gemara says, my time, my the Rabbanan, what's the reason of the Rabbanan, what's their source? Because if it enters your mind to say like Rabbi Shimon, so lichdov rachmanatina, then the Torah could have just written to load. V'lo boy prika, the Torah doesn't need to write anything about unloading. V'ano and then I would say as follows, I'd make a kal v'chomer. Umatina deles batzar balechaim, if when it comes to loading where there is no pain for the animal, v'leka chisarn kis, and there's no loss of money either. So chayiv, so then you're chayiv in that case. So prika deis batzar balechaim v'chisarn kis, when it comes to unloading, where there is tsar balechaim, the animal's in pain, there's a loss of money, it's hurting the animal. So lo kol shekain, so certainly, of course, you need to do it. You don't even need the pasuk to say it. So therefore, why did the Torah write it? If the Torah could have just written loading and didn't need to write unloading, why is the Torah writing both? Lomar lach, that's to say to you, prika b'chinam, it's to say unloading, that's done for free. Te'ina b'schar, but when it comes to loading, that is done for wages. They're essentially making a distinction between the two. They're not exactly identical. If you made a kal v'chomer, they'd have identical halachas. If you're not making a kal v'chomer, so then it means to say that they are different. For Rabbi Shimon, now Rabbi Shimon, my time, what's the reason? Mishum de lo mesai mikra, he simply says that if it only had one pasuk, we wouldn't know what the pasuk is exactly referring to, so we would assume that it's just referring to unloading. We wouldn't assume that it's referring to loading and then make a kal v'chomer unloading as well, and so therefore you do need two psukim. Once you have two psukim, then it's obvious one is referring to loading and one is referring to unloading, but according to Rabbi Shimon, they are identical in the sense that they both have to be done for free. And the Gemara continues, the Rabbanan respond, Mailo Mesayim Yikroi. Why are you saying it's not clear from the Psukim which pasuk is talking about which? Hachaksiv Rovetz Tachas Maso. Here it's written, it's crouching beneath its burden. Clearly that pasuk is talking about unloading the animal. And Hasam Ksiv Noflin Baderech. Over there it says that it's fallen on the road to Ramu Inu to Anayu Ba'archa Mashma. That sounds like the animal and the burden are on the road and you have to load the animal. So it's clear from the context. For Rabbi Shimon, now Rabbi Shimon responds to that, Noflin Baderech Inu. What it means Noflin Baderech is that the animal has fallen on the road. Utu Anayu Alayu Mashma. On the contrary, it could mean that the burden is still on the animal and you're unloading, therefore it's not clear. The Psukim are not clear according to Rabbi Shimon. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Beis Amud Beis.